So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. We have I think lots of great topics to cover today. So might as well go ahead and kick it off. So welcome everyone to our session. This is Incident Response Careers, Challenges and Opportunities. We are so glad you're here with us, and thank you for hopping in. I want to, before we even start, I do want to give a quick shout out. If we have any Day of Security volunteers here, there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. Yeah, whether this is in person or virtual, perhaps even more so virtual, making this happen kind of at scale. And they've been working really hard. So thanks and kudos to them. And if you feel so inclined, I'd say drop a thank you in the main stage chat because they've done an awesome job. Also, a shout out, if you are here considering a cybersecurity career for, you're just at the beginning, we love that and we're so glad you're here. I saw a poll on the main stage that asks whether this is your first security conference. Looking forward to the results of that, and I suspect for some of you it is. So we're so glad you're here. And I know we also have a number of, have already decided to go into cybersecurity. Even better, you've decided to go into incident response. So we have a number of career launchers, and we have a number of folks who are already well into orbit in your cybersecurity careers. So I think you'll find this conversation especially relevant and helpful, wherever you are. So welcome, glad to have you. I'm Kristen Beneduce. I have the pleasure of being your moderator today, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by three very inspiring and influential leaders in incident response. I'm even more pleased that they've agreed to help us shine, sort of an authentic light on what it's really like working in incident response and more of the blue team side of security operations. We have a wonderful 90 minutes together, but also there's so much to talk about in incident response and so many challenges. I think we'll really just be scratching the surface, but we've tried to select, some of the most relevant and those topics that are on our panelists' minds as incident response leaders. So here's how that 90 minutes is kind of going to look. For about the first hour, we're going to hear from our panelists on those hot topics. And then 4 p.m. or a little bit after, we're actually going to turn to the chat for your questions. So please keep those warm. This panel is as much about incident response and our panelists' careers as it is about you and your career and how far you can go. So that part is very important, and we do want to hear your questions. So please keep those warm for us, and we'll get to those. Our roadmap, just in a little more depth, is we'll start talking about what incident response is, and demystify perhaps some of the perceptions around incident response. We're going to play a little bit of Mythbusters to help us do that. We will be talking about the trends, the trends and the things that are on our panelists' minds, the obstacles and challenges they deal with every day, and also the solutions that they're really excited about and the things that they're bringing to, as you'll hear in a moment, they're very important organizations. We're going to talk about their career journeys, and we'll get kind of the personal scoop, kind of go under the hood there. And in the final part, we will do what I am going to call the future of incident response, and that is your questions. And it's the future of incident response because we're it. Us women here, we are it, the future of incident response and defending against cyber attackers. So hopefully that sounds like fun to everyone. I think it is going to be a lot of fun. Let me introduce myself. I'm Kristen Beneduce. I am the Vice President of Women in Cybersecurity Silicon Valley. We're a community supporting women in their cybersecurity careers, at least here where most of our panelists are in the Bay Area. we're actually part of a national organization called Women in Cybersecurity, and we surveyed some of the folks who were here early. We have folks even from London and across the globe. WESIS is probably in your neighborhood now, so you can, it's a good way to continue this celebration of women and continue to network and grow your careers even after this event. I'm also a security engineer and an incident responder at Sandia National Labs. Most of my work focuses on detecting national cybersecurity threats and sometimes remediating the incidents. Now let me turn to our panel, and I'm going to introduce them briefly. First, we have Sneha Regmi. She's the manager of security detection and response at One Medical. And previously, she was the escalations lead for security events at eBay. We have Swathi Joshi. She is the manager of engineering detection and response at Netflix. And before that was a consultant at Mandiant FireEye, where she was, again, helping large clients combat advanced threats. We have Bridget Pelletier-Ross. Bridget is the senior security staff at a growing healthcare startup here in San Francisco called Nuna. And she was previously the 24/7 global incident response manager at Facebook. And I just want to say a quick word about our panelists. They really are not just an inspiration to me, but an inspiration to many, many other women and men in cybersecurity. And they've supported a lot of men and women in their cybersecurity careers. I think they're really a reminder that women can and do lead in cybersecurity. But what I really admire is frankly not that they're women, but that they are passionate, confident, courageous, that they work hard even though they make it look easy, and and they're really true leaders in the blue team side and incident response. So, panelists, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll start you off with a softball because I frankly did not do your backgrounds justice at all. So we'll just start with, what is your background in incident response? How did you get to where you are, and why did you choose this field? And I'm going to go with the top right. I'm right-handed, so it's Sneha.
Hi, everyone. That was a great intro, Kristen. As Kristen mentioned, I am the manager of the security detection response team at One Medical. So my team handles incident response, writing detections, automation, any engineering really that goes with incident response. How did I get into incident response? That's a great question. So it was never planned, right? I didn't even know that incident response was a career. So my career started in the tech world in network telecommunications, which is very different from today's version of where the network and telecom industry is. So I started there, and then I enrolled myself in a computer networking program, a master's program at San Jose State. And part of that program, I think in my last semester, there was a class on information security, ethical hacking is what it was called. And I was just fascinated by this whole concept, So I got really interested in it. And then I got an internship where I got to do a little bit of security awareness, little bit of security operations. And I absolutely fell in love with the idea of log analysis and the idea of trying to find what may have happened that caused an alert, trying to find patterns. So that ever since I got into that, I just realized that's what I'm passionate about. And it kind of follows about my passion I was mentioning the other day to you all. I love watching investigative shows like Criminal Minds and all of that. So I just absolutely fell in love. And ever since I've been in this field, and I'm very passionate about it. So that's how I got into it.
Swathi, what about you?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much for such a kind introduction, Kristen. Likewise, you've been doing amazing work, and so have been so many women who joined the session today. So thanks for all the work everyone's doing. I manage the detection and response team at Netflix. So that's detection engineering, security, incident response, and threat intel. Before that, I was a third-party incident response consultant on the managed defense side at Mandiant. How did I get into the field? I was looking for specialization within security. Previous to Mandiant, I was an associate director of security doing identity access management, application security, and client security functions. Before that, I was a security engineer, and before that, I was a security analyst. So I'd worked on more of the preventative, proactive side of security, but I wasn't as exposed to the defensive side of things. How do you protect organizations? How do you be a defender? And when the Mandiant opportunity came along, I decided, like, why not? This seems really exciting. And also being at the front line of security, right? Like, you don't learn about one organization. I had the opportunity to learn about 20 plus organizations that you support, right? So that was a great growth opportunity for me that I decided to take on. And from there, Netflix was looking to level up their crisis management function, and then I joined the Netflix team from there.
Just a quick follow on. You moved kind of from the proactive side more into defense. Do you think that having that different background is helping you with where you are today, or is it?
Yeah.
Or can you kind of stay in defense the whole way?
Yeah,
maybe a little bit more like Sneha.
Yeah, no, really good question. I think I was lucky to move through different technical domains early on in my career. And I think one of the things I learned quickly was, how do I apply something that I've learned previously to kind of my new role? Like, I remember I was in application security, and then the business was moving fast enough, and we had to do more like ISO certifications and things like that. And I had never done that, right? Like, so I remember thinking, think like an attacker, right? Like, oh, you're thinking through when you're doing application security or threat modeling. Okay, you're thinking like an attacker. What are some of the entry points that folks can get in, right? So I was thinking, what if if I'm thinking like an auditor, what if I can anticipate some of these questions, right? Like, oh, we're getting some certification or some of the compliance efforts. What if I thought like an auditor? What do they care about? Like, what are they going to come in and ask questions on? How can I explain to them? So yeah, I think I'd love to kind of move around and really kind of learn some of the broad concepts of like security. So yeah, for now, I'm definitely a blue teamer, but in the future, who knows?
Interesting. Even though you're on the defense side, it sounds like it's a lot about anticipating what could happen. Let's go to Bridget. Bridget, what about you? Your background in incident response, how you got here and why?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for that intro. It was lovely. Just to reiterate what the other lady said, you were very kind with your words. So I really got started by, pursuing a computer science degree. So I was really focused on becoming a software engineer, and I had no idea that I wanted to get into security. It ended up becoming something that I got exposed to socially. Other people that were in the program had a security bent, and I thought it was really fun, and I liked the community. So I ended up getting Software for Service Scholarship, SFS scholarship with the government. From there, I was able to go work in the government for a short time with the Department of Energy and the Department of Homeland Security over at Argonne National Lab. There, I was doing things like investigating the logs that we had from a botnet. So we had a botnet, and a bunch of attackers were coming in, and it was a honeypot. I'm sorry, it was a honeypot, not a botnet. And hackers were coming in and doing their thing on the honeypot, and I was just keeping track and seeing what they were doing. And so I was doing a lot of investigation that way. Another thing that I was doing was helping to develop an Android app for cryptographic communications. After that, I went into Facebook, and I had an option of different security teams that I could go to. And I chose the one that involved threat detection, incident response, and threat intel, because I really liked what I was doing with that honeypot, really investigating what those, bad actors were up to, and understanding, how malware worked and those sorts of things. It was very fun. I did that for a couple of years. And then over time, it became clear that we needed to grow our incident response to be, more on a global scale. And so I was one of the folks who helped to grow that team from a handful, about 5 people, to over 30. And we expanded into a couple new locations. And so just really creating a very robust and large incident response program there. I did that for about 2 years. And then, so I went from government to, a large tech company. And now I'm in a startup. And, incident response is just one of the many things that I do. Now I'm more of a security engineer. I'm writing code, I'm building infrastructure, I'm doing AppSec, I'm doing vulnerability management. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of variety. And incidents, I've noticed, don't come up as often, when you're not as big of a target as a large scale company like One Medical or Netflix or Facebook. And so it's a lot of wearing many hats. And I really enjoy it. So the way that I got in was just sort of like following, I fell into it, just following the opportunities that came my way.
There's a couple other things you said too, which is community. And I think that's partly what we're doing here today at Day of Security, that you have others who are interested in security as well. And also really interesting, a little bit like Swathi, but more from a software engineering end, that you started kind of somewhere else, and and have built up all of these skills that are contributing to your incident response career. Very cool. Okay, so now for the not softball questions, and I'll start with something that I've seen be a sort of almost trope perception in other organizations at where I work, even my even the perceptions that my family has about incident response, and it's even something that I'm starting to hear more and more from inside the cybersecurity community and inside the incident response community, and that's this idea that incident response is like firefighting, and not only that incident response is like firefighting and constantly putting out fires, that your job is never ending and there's multiple fires at a time. This is the Mythbusters part. Is that myth, myth and legend, or is it true? Is that a fair statement? And if it is true, are there different levels of fires, or is everything just like a big California fire, wildfire? We'll start with Sneha again.
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, so there are definitely different levels of fire, and not everything is a fire. I think first we got to put that out there, right? And I think this is where leaders of the team play a huge role, right? What is the right level of urgency that you have set kind of defines how your team takes everything, whether it's an event, even an incident, right? Removing panic from, handling incidents and even handling events. I think leaders play a huge role there. And I think another thing that I have personally seen help even my team is defining what an incident means in the scope of your role or the scope of your organization. I mentioned that I worked at eBay previously, which is a way bigger company. One Medical is more of a mid-sized company. Incidents can mean different things there. And same to what Bridget said, we see different kinds of incidents in different companies, right? So defining what is an incident first will help you not make everything in fire. So in the example of my role, we say that, okay, in the world of InfoSec, any event that may have a negative functional or informational impact on our systems, data, users, where there is some indication to say something is malicious. And sometimes it could be a lot of evidence to say, sometimes it's indication, right? So that avoids a sysadmin making a change by mistake, get blown up into an incident. And how do we know that, right, in the beginning? That identification phase in an incident is so important, where you get a security event, you calmly investigate it, do a preliminary investigation, find out, is this actually something bad or is this benign? And if it is bad, what levels of bad is it? There are a lot of incidents on the low severity side of things that don't need to be, let's all wake up in the middle of the night and just handle this, versus there might be occasionally a critical incident that, yes, we might have to handle it right away. So I think defining that, and it's really on leaders, because I have seen that model in different organizations where some will call everything an incident and there's just this panic all the time, versus some where it's very scoped. And even if an incident does get declared, the team knows how to go about it. That would be so not everything is a fire.
Points, yeah, and around creating those boundaries. Let's see, Swathi, what do you think? Is it fighting, and is it constant fires?
Yeah, this is obviously an analogy that's used a lot, and sometimes I think in the industry also overused, right? Are we the team to kick open the door and come put the fire out? Obviously we do it with the help of our partners and other stakeholders and the extended team and other engineering teams and all of that. But yeah, I think kind of respecting the lever, right? Like not saying, oh, everything is a high priority incident, like really figuring out what that means for your organization, and kind of respecting that button, and saying, yeah, when it is a high incident, yep, we really need everyone on deck, like trying to figure this out. Versus say a low priority one, hey, we're doing sort of the best effort situation. This is business hours only. We don't need anyone staying up past 6 p.m. or past midnight for this. I think that's something all sort of incident response teams take seriously, because it's really important to kind of form that trust with folks when someone's pushing something over the fence. Like you need to build that trust to say, yeah, we're here, we're gonna catch it and we're gonna handle it. So I think, yeah, it's really kind of important to make that distinction.
Thank you. Yeah. And Bridget, what about in your experience? Has incident response ever been like firefighting?
It can feel like that at times. I really agree with what Sneha and Swathi are saying, that you need to understand how to prioritize and when to say no. There's a great story of my boss at one time was a manager of another team, and they were responding. They were actually the internal abuse team at the time, and they were constantly getting these inbound requests to go and investigate something. And when he was the manager, he told them, he empowered them to say no, and to understand, like, this is my current priority list. This is how your new item, ranks in severity, and this is the timeline that you can expect. As a result of that empowerment, maybe 1 or 2 weeks later, one of the senior members of that team got a request from his boss's boss's boss. And to be honest, it wasn't that severe. And so he said no to his boss's boss's boss, and was and first of all, that boss man was totally fine with it. He's like, okay, I understand and I respect your priorities. Good for you to manage up in that way. And when this incident responder came back and told the team about it, he was so proud. He was like, and I said no. And everyone cheered for him. And so learning to say no is a big deal. There's another point that I do want to make about, is it always firefighting? The fact is no. I mean, I said this earlier, that depending on the type of company that you can have an incident, frequently once a month, or you could have an incident once or twice a year. Depends on the company, depends on the number of customers and the services that you provide. And so, but there is downtime in between, and knowing how to use that downtime to regain agency, right? And I think, I might mention this more, but it's very reactive when you're firefighting, and it can feel at times like you don't have agency over the work that you do. And so during that downtime, it's best to use that time to have a forward-thinking mindset and work on, lessons learned, tools that you can help, methods to make the next go around easier, prevention, so that sort of thing. Yep.
Awesome answers there. And I hear sometimes it's just not that urgent. It's like there's regular fishing, and then there's the CEO getting fished and it's still fishing. But to your point about incident response being reactive, there's another perception I want to talk about, and that's I call it the Wonder Woman or Batman effect. It's this idea that incident response only comes out when bad things happen. So that begs the question: is incident response necessarily reactive? And is that true? Does incident response just come out when bad things happen? Let's go over to Swathi this time.
Yeah, there is a large portion of the work that is reactive, right? Like you're there to handle the inevitable security incidents that come up. But also when an incident is happening, is not the time to figure out how to handle it, obviously. And there's a lot of preparation work, right? Like there is tabletops, there is procedures to write, there are, we also try and do like a checklist approach of like, okay, this is happening, then can we do run books, right? Like obviously the focus is we don't want same type of incidents happening again. That means we haven't learned from our previous incidents, but it does happen, right? Like because cause of an incident is not really known at the beginning. You're really trying to scope this out and investigate. And each time it could be different cause because of which an incident is happening. And I think there's a large portion of the work, especially like on our team, we have responder developers, right? Like who are responding when they're on call, and when they're not on call, they're building tooling to help with this. And, for example, forensics, right? Like how can we have tooling to make sure we can pull the artifacts for investigation as needed? Say if we are doing an internal investigation, right? Like how can we have the right resources ready to do that? And then there is this whole area of work where I think as an industry, we all need to move forward and do better in how do we learn from incidents? How do we kind of extract the patterns that we are seeing? And how do we communicate that to rest of engineering, rest of business stakeholders, rest of information security, or even our partner teams to say, hey, this is what we've seen, like, phishing. We've seen an increased attempt or increased number of incidents for this specific part of our company, and why, right? Like what can we do to mitigate that? So I think there are large portions where like engineering and automation, detection rating, and also learning from security incident and on our team, we call it response services, like tabletops, training, preparedness, all of that is not reactive, but is in support of that mission.
Yeah, thanks. Sneha, what do you think? Is you agree, disagree? Is it necessarily reactive? Do people have this perception that we just come out when bad things happen?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what Swathi is saying. I think there are times when a lot of the work we do is reactive. Now, I think it's important. I think that's where how are you as a leader controlling the messaging is also plays a huge role. So let's talk about when incident is not happening. That could mean that the detections your team wrote have been catching things early, or the automation has been helping a little bit. The preventive controls that maybe working. Taking that and also branding your team, going out there talking about it, so that execs are not just seeing you and only bringing bad news, right? So you can control that messaging there. And even if a bad thing does happen, it's very difficult to prevent incidents, right? There's no concept of zero incidents. I would love to see a company do that, but for the incidents that do happen, even using like that saying, right, never let a fire go to waste. So even on the bad times, there's a lot of things, opportunities you can leverage as a leader to get the resources you need, get the right tools you need, in any way or form that may improve the security posture of the company. So I feel like the perception is on your, as a leader, on up to you how you change that messaging. If your team is only going and talking to execs every time, only during an incident, then maybe that is how everybody's going to look at your team. But all the other work, right, you're doing to try to improve the security posture from a blue team side of things, right? Because incident response is not just responding to incidents in that when that happens, there's so much work that goes into logging, detecting, threat intel, all of those kind of things. So I think you can control that messaging and change the perception.
I love that point, about being seen, not just when the bad things are happening, but all of the time. Bridget, do you want to add anything to this? And you had touched on before, there is downtime. So we touched on a few of the things, but what are some of the things that that incident response teams can be doing in downtime?
Yeah, I think during that downtime, there's a lot of regaining of agency over your future, building the tools that you're going to use to automate your processes, as Swathi brought up. The other thing also is that the lessons learned is really important. The postmortems need to be actually kept track of and followed through with. I think that those are something that retrospective, look and that insight that you can get into what could we have done to prevent this? What could we have done to make this an easier process the next time? Is all extremely valuable. And in addition to this general topic of the perception of incident responders in the company, I remember there were times where I was doing first just the threat detection, just the first line of defense and response that wasn't necessarily classified as an incident. And sometimes I'd have to go and contact an employee and just get more information. Those employees were generally scared because they thought they were in trouble, and that I was there to wag my finger at them. And so that was a big part of the branding that Sneha mentioned. It's really important to be seen as an enabler of security and not necessarily an enforcer of policy. And so, we took our branding from like a shield and a lock to something like a heart-shaped lock to know like we're your friends. And so it really is important that people in the company see you more than just the people that come when things go wrong or the people that come when you've done something wrong. And so getting out there and just having blameless communications when you need to gather more information is also another key to the branding of your role.
So cool that we're talking about cybersecurity, but we're also talking about branding here. and these are diverse skills, like no question, these are diverse skills. And also y'all are Wonder Woman. Okay, so there is downtime sometimes, but as incident responders, there is going to be this inevitable incident or even more severe escalation or even crisis, so to speak. And that's also part of the job, right, is dealing with the true crises. So when it is your job to communicate the bad news to other departments or stakeholders, or maybe even more challengingly to senior leaders, how do you do that? How do you effectively communicate that bad news? And I'm going to start with Swathi because I know that Swathi he has quite a bit of experience with this and knows a lot about it.
You know, this comes with the territory, right? Like detection and response is one of the most active and visible role within a company, and I think that's it. It also, obviously, there is, to your point, there is stress associated with IR because you're going in a pretty stressful situation. In terms of like communicating news to leadership, I think just fact-based communication, right? Like as we are progressing, the first few minutes of an incident and a few hours of an incident are crucial. It's purely like a scoping exercise. You're trying to figure out the impact. You're trying to figure out the blast radius. You're trying to figure out what's the scope of this incident, right? And it's definitely a very changing narrative. So we have some guidelines in place where we say, okay, if this is a high severity incident, then we'll send comms out, you know, for these specs every X hours, right? Like if it's a medium priority incident, say if it's a low priority one, we might send something out, you know, once a day. And I think being kind of very clear in your communication to say, hey, this is the last update for this incident. We're closing it out, and we're not going to give any more updates, things like that. And we were taking a specific training where people, you know, talked about executive swoop, right? So say everyone's in there, like handling an incident, and say an exec comes in and says, what's the root cause of an incident? What's the status, right? And to be able to go to that executive and say, hey, we are working on it. What you're doing right now may not be helpful in an incident, right? Like, so root causing, we'll do that a little bit later. We're really trying to figure out the blast radius of an incident. We are trying to stop the bleeding right now. So that executive swoop is not useful. But at the same time, if we don't manage up, then these questions are going to be asked, right? So we have a template that we manage. We have two types of communications that we do from our team, a tactical report and an executive report. Tactical report is for incident participants where we say, hey, here are the conditions, actions, and needs, right? Like here are the conditions, here are the actions that we are taking, and here is what we need, and here is what we need from this team, here is the support that we need. And then for exec reports, we do more of like, hey, here is the current status, here is what happened, and here is what we are doing about it. And there's always like, you send off that report and you're like, oh, I got the date wrong, or I got something. That's always gonna happen.
Such a good point. You know, in crisis, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be bounded and well communicated. Yeah. Let's go over to Bridget on this one.
Yeah, so we actually, you know, found that executive swoop that Swathi is talking about, where, you know, everyone wants to know what's going on, tell me right now. It can be distracting from the work that needs to get done. And so what we've done is, or at least while I was at Facebook, what we've done is define roles, and everyone has a role, and that, you know, the first one is the incident commander. And they're the one who is in charge of handling those inbound requests for communication, as well as scheduled outbound ones. They're also in charge of delegation. So more than one person needs to be investigating at a time, and people need to be aware of what they are investigating. And then, so it's comms, delegation, and when neither of those are happening, an investigation portion of their own that they can cover. And so what that does is, there's a single point of communication within the incident response cohort of folks, meaning that there's one person to get interrupted. And that person generally, you know, we didn't put them there unless they had demonstrated or had proven ability in staying very calm and level-headed, being able to communicate very clearly, being able to stay focused on facts and not, you know, get worked up about potential threats. You know, the other thing that we did for communication was establish within, and so this is talking about in a larger company where you have these types of employee resources, establish a sort of on-call with legal and PR where you can have a lawyer or a legal representation with you, and they can definitely give you a lot of help on what to communicate and what not to communicate. You also benefit from something called attorney-client privilege, where your communications are not discoverable should there be, a governmental audit retroactively or a PR disaster. So those sorts of things, there's a science. And the truth is that it's not a complicated science. You just need to get familiar with it. And then it can just kind of be like riding a bike. You just, oh, it's happened. Let me spin up my comms channel with legal, get AC Priv. Let me designate a commander who will do those comms with executive leadership. We can even put it on the calendar. And then these are our investigators. So I think the best way to remove that sort of stress is just to have clearly defined roles where everyone knows what they're doing.
Yep, perfect. Thanks. Now, how about you? Tips for communicating bad news and reducing the stress?
Yeah, I love this one because I've been in situations where I've had, to Swati's point, people watch over my shoulder as I'm writing the report. So don't do that, right? And I think the role of an incident commander is so critical in an incident. That's why designating an incident commander right away is important. And this person is not necessarily only technical. This person, to Bridget's point, has to be someone who can communicate, who can be calm, who can take the technical details and present only the necessary information to the execs, right? Not the nitty-gritty details that they don't need to know. And I love what Swathi mentioned too. It's like when execs walk in, it's not helpful, and you ideally want only you, if you're the incident commander, to be the point of contact, because the team, the technical core incident team, wants to work on technical stuff to move forward with containment resolution. Whereas the execs don't necessarily care about that level of detail. So I think when you control that, the communication channel to one point of contact, it avoids a lot of confusion on both ends, not just from the exec side, but also from your technical team, right? And then sticking to, like I said, what scope, impact, those kind of things, what is being done, being direct if you need something from them, and setting the right expectations right away is so important. If an incident is declared and it's been like 15 minutes and you're going and telling an exec, oh, my team can resolve this in 2 hours, don't do that when you don't know. In fact, this is where I think tabletops help a lot. We actually did one where we had a very high pressure, we created a very high pressure environment in the tabletop exercise, where we had one of the execs actually directly ask the incident commander that, okay, so when are we moving to containment? I mean, it's been hours, you guys are investigating. And the incident commander said, well, at the scale of this incident in the tabletop, this will take us at least 5 days to fully contain. And being honest about it, because honestly, there are incidents at large scale that may take months sometimes to eradicate and resolve. So making that part of the normal, I mean, nobody wants to hear that, but occasionally that might happen. So setting the right expectations, I think, is very important. Otherwise, you're going to create disaster for both sides, technical as well as them, right? You want to avoid that.
Yeah, absolutely. If all of you almost have mentioned, the idea, in some respect, of an incident commander, and I want to talk a little bit about hiring. And we've identified this incident commander as someone who's not only calm but has the technical skills. And also this idea, the idea of hiring in incident response is, we know there are 3.5 million jobs open. Many of those are incident responders, and here we are talking about the variety of skills they need. So, is hiring for these roles, especially the more senior roles, a challenge, especially for you as managers? And Sneha, you're kind of on a roll on that, and I know this is something that you think about a lot. So let's start with you.
Hiring can be difficult. I think, it can be challenging. Incident one of those roles where a breadth of knowledge is useful. You don't know what kind of incidents you get. So, different kinds of backgrounds help, right, in security. Now, there's really two sides of this challenge, right? Now, from a hiring manager point or a company's side, you are looking for someone, especially at a senior level, who can drive that communication like we just talked about, who can be there, stand up to those questions that come in a crisis situation, take charge of a room, right? At the, maybe if you are not hiring for a senior person, then technical skills alone might be enough. But now flip that on the person who's applying. They might look at it and be like, oh my God, all these skills, from log analysis to communication to I got to deal with crisis. How do I do this, right? So one thing I have tried, and again, there's no perfect formula, is to diversify your team, diversify the skills in your team as much as possible, and understand that there's not going to be one or two people that is going to meet all your needs. And, just as us as managers don't know everything, accepting that. I've tried to have a team with, let's say we have a person with IR background, process side of things. We have a person with IT infrastructure kind of knowledge, a person who can really code and help us in automation. Obviously, there's a foundation you want to have that everybody has. Like, you want to know how computers operate, how DNS works, what's normal, what's abnormal. That level of foundation is there in everybody. But then there's SMEs, right? So when an incident does happen, everybody can chime in and bring the best that they're really good at. And sometimes people want to learn from each other, and that's also helpful. So hiring is difficult, but I think there's little tweaks we can make to kind of diversify our team and not try to find everything in that one or two people. That's at least what I've tried.
Love that. And for those who are, breaking into cybersecurity, take note, it's need to know everything. You just need a good foundation. Bridget, what about at Facebook and also, at a startup, which is a very different staffing environment? Is hiring for incident response or security a challenge?
Absolutely. It's not necessarily easy to find that person that meets all of your requirements. I really liked what Sneha said about, having a diverse team composition, that not everybody needs to have the same boxes checked off. And that even goes for the concept of incident responders need to be extremely senior and experienced. The truth is that you need a group of individuals who are capable of being an incident commander, but your incident response team can have the composition of those who are even, new grads or mid-level career, where they're getting this mentorship from those commanders. So once you've built out your team that it's, populated enough with those who are the senior members, then you can really start hiring those with entry-level or mid-level experience, come in to get mentored to become those incident commanders, and you can grow them from within. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, hiring for security in general, hiring for incident response specifically, frankly, hiring for any position. Sheryl Sandberg wrote a book called Lean In many years ago, and in it there's this famous quote that I've heard at so many women conferences, which is that women tend to apply to a job only if they meet 100% of the requirements, whereas we've seen with men that they'll apply to a job even if they only meet 60% of the requirements. In addition to that, LinkedIn did their own research that showed that women just apply to fewer applications. They just apply to fewer. We don't know about the requirements matching, but they apply to fewer positions, and in particular for less senior positions. But on the flip side, women are more likely to get offers from the jobs that they apply to. So what that sort of suggests is that women are applying to jobs that they know they're a shoo-in. Like this one for sure, I could for sure get that job. I'll apply to it. Whereas obviously, we see men or other gender identities just sort of, shooting their shot, applying and seeing what they get. And I think that is what I have found. It's so difficult to get female candidates to apply. And one of those things that I think that like we as, you know, a group of women within this industry and externally, we need to apply for those jobs we don't think we're qualified for. We need to apply for those jobs that are a level of seniority above our own. And we'll be surprised, honestly, at the offers that we get. It is one of those things, like so many men that I work with apply to jobs and just, you know, get those offers, even though they were just like, I'm making it up as I go along. So I think that it's important that we give ourselves more of a hand. You know. Hi, Eva. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hear that, and also taking notes. Get out there. That's the message.
Yeah, I remember going to my Netflix interview, and I was in an Uber, had flown from the East Coast to the West Coast for the interview. And this was this random, you know, woman who was an Uber driver, and we were chatting, and it was only like a 6-minute drive, and she was like, "Go get your job." You know, I was like, yes, like, yeah, I got like this really like kind of pump of motivation. But I think to Bridget's point, like, just hiding insecurity is hard, right? Like you just said, Kristen, like there are millions of jobs, like openings, right? And then I think there is the question of the right fit. How can we kind of build that like cognitive diversity on the team, right? Like on my team, like Ashley comes from NASA, and then Kevin comes from like the finance industry, like Forrest comes from like academia. So how can we bring sort of those different perspectives kind of in, and also more on like security operations and things like that? They're really like ripe for new talent to sort of come into this, right? Like and learn. I think detection response kind of gives you a lot of visibility into the environment because you deal with a lot of different types of incidents. So it would be a great kind of way to come into the field.
Yeah, thank you. Also, you know, we've talked a lot about the challenges. Let's not forget all of the opportunities and the great things that your teams are working on. So my question here is, you know, we have attackers, frequent attackers, maybe not all the time, but that's probably because we're scoping it well and have great leaders. We haven't really talked about, you know, burnout amongst teams, but that is absolutely a real issue in incident response and cybersecurity. We have a plethora of tools in incident response, so many tools in many organizations, and it can be a lot to learn. So how do we turn the tables for incident responders so it's not always reactive, you know, and we're avoiding some of these challenges? What's the top solutions that you're focusing on today? Bridget, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. You know, burnout. Oh, we love burnout. That the stress that you get in this job is just like any other job that has tight deadlines and a lot of people relying on you. And handling that sort of burnout, and I think is a lot of like just taking that personal time for yourself, knowing when to say no, being able to communicate when you need to say no, those sorts of things. But then also to like not just let it be a reactive job. For me personally, when I'm constantly in response mode and reactivity mindset, it just feels like I don't have a say on my day-to-day, and that can be very draining. So don't let it just be reactive. You know, that's my opinion. Don't let it just be reactive. Have a forward-thinking mindset. There's my cat. Think about, you know, what can you do to make this better next time? That's the lessons learned, following up on postmortem items, you know, figuring out how to automate as much as you can. So just regaining that agency, I think, helps a lot in this scenario.
So true, and such good points. And it starts with us. It starts with you. You also touched on automation. I know this is something that both Swathi, automation engineering, both Swathi and Sneha think a lot about. So Swathi, how about you? What are some of the solutions? How do we turn the tables for incident responders?
Yeah, I think, automation is definitely one of the biggest leverage that we have, that we could use. A quick plug, my team open sourced a tool called Dispatch, where, within a few minutes, like the focus is to how can we reduce this cognitive load on the incident responders, right? Like, oh, an incident is coming in, you need to open a Jira ticket, or, whatever tool you use, you need to open a Slack channel, you need to get an investigation doc going, you need to get people in a war room, on a bridge together, you need to ask the first few questions together. Like, that's a lot of things to do. How about we automate that? That way the responder can focus on, okay, what do we need to solve, right? Like, so Dispatch focuses on, with this one click of a button, it creates all of these resources for you. And it has, we have an investigation template. It based on the type of incident, like based on sort of the data impacted or like the type of the incident, it'll have like the first few questions that you need to get answer to get this going, right? Like, so I think automation is our highest leverage. And yeah, to Bridget's point about the burn and turn, right? Like, you do IR for like a couple of years and you're like, yeah, this is too much. And then you want to leave. Like, the problem is real. I remember for me when I was at Mandiant, like I described that as like my best job and my worst job. Like, it was incredible the amount of learning that I got from the role. But also at the time, my daughter was very young. She was a year and a half. And when I was at Mandiant for 2 years, and she was kind of 3.5 when I left, like, I definitely felt like an absentee mom sometimes. There have been multiple Fridays where I've been on the phone, and my husband's eating dinner by himself, or I'm not with my family, right? And I remember, I think that it was about a 6-month period where it got so hard that I had to ask my mom to come in and help. So there are these situations where this happens, and I'm glad I stuck with it, but I think to Bridget's point, like, how can you balance that out? Like, I had a great team, surrounding me, and same thing at Netflix. Like, really honored to be working with everyone here. And when, say, there are 4 incidents happening, do we have the psychological safety within the team to say, hey, this is getting a lot. Like, can someone like come in and help or pitch in? I think that's kind of important too in hiring. Like, can you get that right fit who'll come in and help your teammates?
And Sneha, what about you? What's giving you hope these days?
Yeah, I think, they both kind of covered it, right? Automation. I think right kind of automation, what you actually need is important, though. I will say, don't just automate because another company is automating. You should automate what is your pain point, right? A lot of incidents, like Swathi said, working on what can help you get focus on the real work that needs to be done instead of worrying about the administrative tasks. That should be your focus. If you're maybe not seeing a lot of incidents, but you're seeing a lot of good alerts, but how do you make responding to it easy? So one thing we're trying, there's again, and nothing is perfect, it's all about learning and trying different things, is whenever we've made this part of the detection writing process itself, that if anybody is, you've done your query building, you've done your login, all of that checking, and you now have a detection in mind that you're going to push, you've gotten your peer review, all of that fun stuff is done. Now, before you actually push it to production, that means the detection actually goes into your alert queue if next time it does fire. We don't push anything until there is a partially automated, as much as possible, playbook associated with it, right? So making that part of the process. So, and when we first started doing this, it was chaos. Like, some people were doing it, some not, but just doing it every quarter. We do not push this until you have obviously sometimes you can automate a lot of things, sometimes, partial automation. So taking off that load, not only after an incident happens, but even before, when you're analyzing things, making that part of the process really helps. And as far as burnout, yeah, I think what makes IR a little more different and stressful maybe than other roles is because it's so interrupt driven, right? Like Bridget said, you can't plan like when an incident is going to knock on your door. I mean, sometimes it could be that Friday at 5 p.m. Sometimes it's Monday at 8 a.m. when you're finally catching up to emails, right? So you really don't know. But if you we talked about this earlier, use the lessons learned, use the prep, have automations in place, have roles clearly defined, try not to have single point of failure, so that if you're not there, that's it. It's a disaster. That's not the model leader should be operating on, right? So if you do all of those things, even in an interrupt-driven world, you may be able to have some control over that. And finally, time off. Oh my God, I cannot stress the importance of time off. And I've been very fortunate to work with leaders who have made sure I take time off. And when they do that for me, I can go do that to my team. When my team sees me taking time off, they feel like encouraged to go take time off. And I think we need to stop making overworking and working 24/7 like amazing, like it's really celebrated. It's not for everyone, to each their own. We need to start respecting people who show a balance, in their work and home life, who say no to doing too much, right? And we need to also appreciate them, because I think there's a concept in maybe even in tech, not just security, that, oh my God, this person works so much, round the clock and all. Maybe that works for them. That's not going to work for everyone. So we need to stop glamorizing that's nice, and that's what we should all be going for.
Yeah, I love that. You've all kind of we've talked a lot about again, challenges and now opportunities and things that we can do to improve. But I want to make sure we turn to you and your careers. So let's talk about maybe less how you measure success in incident response and how you measure success in your career. Bridget, do you want to start us off?
Too. Yeah, and that's a distinction, because incident response success is one very important thing, but just as an individual, your own definition of success will be different from anybody else's. So I'm really happy to share with you what my definition is of career success is for me, and that is the fact that I'm like a traveler, whether it be a physical location or it be a life experience. And so I really like to gain exposure to the breadth of the security landscape, right? So I love to do coding and engineering and building. I love that. It's so satisfying. You've got that short-term gratification, dopamine hit. And I really loved, being able to be exposed to working in the government, working in a high tech industry, working at a startup. Those are varied experiences that come with their own set of challenges and opportunities. The roles themselves that I've had, I've been an investigator, a malware researcher, a honeypot, log diver or spelunker. I've obviously incident response, threat detection, building automation, managing large global teams. And now what I'm doing, I think at the startup, that's where I get this sort of like fix for my need for breadth the most, because there's not that many people. So I get to do a lot of different things. And so now I'm doing, vulnerability management, and I'm doing, pen tests, I'm doing application security, and I'm building out infrastructure and learning so much about AWS. And so for me, success is constantly satisfying that itch. Where am I going to go and learn a thing next? And the truth is, I don't know where my ultimate end will be. Or I don't know if I'll always be even in AppSec or any of those sorts of things. It's just constantly moving and growing and feeling like I'm not stagnating. That's really my definition.
the idea of being able to travel even within security is super cool. I think if there were a TV show or a book, it might be Bridget. Where in the security world is Bridget Pelletier-Ross? Bridget the Traveler. Awesome. Thanks, Bridget. Sneha, what about you? How do you measure success in your career?
Yeah, and I really want to stress on that point again that don't compare success. Your definition, what you're passionate about, should matter, right? So in the context of that, similar to what Bridget said, I want to keep learning and growing. Obviously, within security, whether it's advancement in career in terms of responsibilities or trying different things, even within the space of DNR, moving from a big company where everybody, you had teams just to do certain things, moving to One Medical, which was initially a startup, right? And similar to what Bridget said is we had like 3 people, I think, or 4 people where we did everything here and there. And that has been so, that similar to you, Bridget, that has kept me going. I think otherwise I get bored really fast. I'm like, I'm not learning, right? So for me, I need to learn and grow. And then also security is one thing, right? Success, for me personally, I want to feel balanced as well. I want to be doing technical things, but at the same time giving back, whether it's to security community, doing talks like this, networking, learning from others, even outside of security, right? I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion in the tech space. So trying my best to be involved there. In our company, we are trying to write blog posts representing certain roles within tech that are not so popular. So all of those things I want to keep doing. And for me, instead of just being amazing in one thing only, I'd rather try different things and, whatever I'm passionate about. And that really makes me happy at the end of the day. So if I'm happy at the end of the day in what I'm doing, no matter security or outside thing, that to me is, okay, my day was successful. And I feel like, I'm successful. Otherwise, what's the point?
Awesome, thanks. And finally, Swathi?
Yeah, I think when I left Mandy and joined Netflix, one of the things was I think at Mandy and Fire, it was really firefighting, right? Like you would move from one account to the other, one issue to the other. There are also like long-term strategic partnerships you would build around like, okay, how do I provide sort of, consulting and that strategic partnership with the clients. But at the end of the day, if you had asked me, what did you build? Like I felt like I didn't have anything to show for it. So I wanted to move to an organization where I could build the whole program, build a team, and kind of take it, mature it, right? So I've been really kind of enjoying doing that. I think for us, I think we need to have more women at the table, and especially, like boardrooms and, I think senior executive leadership. I think there is a huge gap there. So how can we kind of pull each other up and kind of get to that boardroom, get to that exec level, get to that C level? Like how can we do that? And how can we build our skill set along the way and get to that journey, be entrepreneurs, that's going to be exciting in the future.
Thank you. And that kind of segues into something is sort of a requisite, I think, that we talk about before we turn to questions. This being a celebration of women in security, and that's the facts that there still are fewer women in security, and that is especially true at the more senior levels. It's in many industries there is a funnel effect for women, but it's especially pronounced in cybersecurity. So what are your final thoughts on what it's been like being a woman in security and what the community can be doing to support women better? And Sneha, we'll kick this one off with you.
Yeah, I think representation, having a seat at the table, table diverse as much as possible is so important, right? I think when young women see, to Swathi's point, women in any gender for that matter, not just men, in roles, whether it's technical roles, whether it's mid-management roles, whether it's exec leadership roles, right? It gives them that feeling that, okay, somebody who looks like me can do this, so I can do this too. And I think I've been fortunate to see that, right? Whether it's with the woman I'm speaking with today, also like I follow some women who are CISOs, right? Today, Rinki Sethi in Twitter is one of the ladies I'm very inspired by. So representation has a lot of power for any minority group, not just from a gender perspective, right? And then I think we talked a little bit about how do we get diverse recruiting, right? How do we get more women entering the field? But at the same time, to keep women, especially people after they've taken gaps in their career for personal reasons, having kids and all of that, we want to create an environment when they come back, they feel included. There was a study actually done where they found that only 43% of women in STEM roles actually come back, so how do we fix that, right? I think it's not only to bring women in the field, is how do we keep them, creating that inclusive environment, mentoring them. If somebody has mentored you, pass that along, teach a skill to someone. And we don't have to change this overnight, but if everybody can influence one person, build that self-confidence, right? That can just help create a atmosphere where women not only can enter, but they really can thrive in this field. And I think that still there's a lot of gap, because to your point, I think we have, 24% of women, of 24% of security roles are women, which is, we still have a lot of work to do there. So not only bringing them in, but how do we keep them doing things around that as well?
Makes me think of Swathi's Uber driver. Bump. So I just need a bump, but also representation definitely matters. Bridget, what about you? What's been challenging, if anything, about being a woman in cybersecurity, and what can the community do?
Yeah, I really love the points that Swathi and Sneha made. It's the more that folks that you can see in a higher position who look like you, the more encouraging and inspiring that is. So I think that, but that's not always something that's possible. And so one of the things that I've done, which is I found to be extremely helpful in my career, is not only look to women to be mentors. So there are I think networking is the most important thing that you can do for your career. Swathi, thumbs up. Yes, it is literally the most important thing that you can do for your career. As a direct result of networking, I've gotten jobs that I have in my repertoire, and as a direct result of networking, I've made some very real friendships. I can tell an interesting story about an unlikely connection that I made. I was impromptu invited into a meeting with my manager and a lawyer. And he just thought the lawyer was cool and wanted to introduce us. I later on had a question for the lawyer. He said, we shouldn't put this in writing, and let's chat. So I scheduled some lunch with him, and then by the time the lunch rolled around, the topic was no longer relevant. I didn't need an answer from him. It was not even on the table. So rather than canceling it, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to lunch with him and just chat. And I think it was about halfway through, he's like, oh, you just want to hang out. I was like, yeah. And as a direct result of this, he's an amazing person. I got to know him. He approached me. He's like, look, I want to learn from you about cybersecurity, and in exchange, I will teach you about leadership and concepts of leadership, because he actually, is a trainer for this very prestigious leadership program. And so we had that sort of bake-off where we would just help each other out. As a direct result of that, we've been able to connect each other with folks when needed. And so, but the main point beyond that story is networking is the most important thing that you can do. Being shy can make that difficult, but it really, you need to take hold of your future, and sometimes unexpected people will be just the connection that you needed. So.
Yeah, such good advice. And also on the flip side of that, I'm so glad you brought up, being introverted and networking. The flip side of that is I think, inclusion, right? And helping other people to be your allies.
Yeah, and I think especially like in security, we have a long road ahead to make sure we are inclusive and diverse. And I think to Sneha's point, like hiring women is one thing, and what about retention? What about creating the space that you want to stay, right? Like I remember one situation, like I was flying to a different state, and this was, you know, a breach response type situation. So I was going in, this was a healthcare field, and I was going in to help one of the clients. So, you know, you're in a boardroom setting, like everyone's there. It's all hands on deck type of situation. And a few minutes into the war room, you know, one of the senior leaders like turns to me and says, "Hey, you're here, you know, who's taking care of the kids?" And I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, like I'm here to do my job. And you want to give the person the benefit of the doubt of like, you know, maybe they really they really wanted to know. But at the same time, like thought did cross my mind. Like, hey, if I were a man sitting here, would they ask me the same question, right? I was taken aback a little bit, and then I was like too cocky or something. Like I came up with this response of like, yeah, I think my husband is going to take offense that you're questioning his parenting skills, right? Because I'm sure he can manage my daughter for a couple of days. And coming out of the meeting, like my other friends, male allies were like, "Oh, that was a good response. You know, we wanted to support, but didn't know what to say. So how can we bring, you know, our allies into this conversation? And you know, what would be okay to say in that moment, like how to handle that, right? Like it's definitely sort of a human to human level interaction. So I think that's another thing that I really think about, you know, how can we kind of move this conversation? How can we get people more involved? And, you know, can someone say something when these small microaggressions, like, you know, paper cuts happen?
Story. What a good example of, you know, the importance of allyship and growing that as well to make change for us. And it starts with us, like Bridget, you know, like Bridget said, you kind of have to get out there and find those allies too. Well, thank you, panelists. Amazing responses and insights. Of course, I do want to turn to questions. So if you were holding on to one, go ahead and type it in the chat. We do already have one from Tammy. And her question is, what is your opinion on threat detection versus incident response? Should experience in one precede the other? I think all of you are more than qualified to answer that. Would anybody like to take it?
Sneha, you should go for it.
Yeah, I was going to really quick. I love that question. You know, I think traditional definition of IR, and again, each company has their own, so I'll just speak of my experience, was there's a separate team to write these detections, separate team to only respond, a SOC kind of model. That is shifting today. SOC-less approach is what we start seeing, right? Where you're hiring engineers. You're hiring engineers to write detections, to respond. They are the best person to respond to the detections that they have written, and they're also the best person to write those detections because they know to reduce the number of false positives. Otherwise, they're the ones who have to go respond, right? Because that I have seen be a big problem. So I almost want to say that we should to look at it as one function, obviously with different SMEs in it, instead of, you know, threat detection being separate versus response being separate. They're so integrated today that yes, knowledge in one helps the other and vice versa.
You know, I have to say I've seen people succeed as starting off with threat detection and then moving incident response. And then I've seen people succeed just starting off an incident response. So yeah, I don't think there's a requirement for one to precede the other, but they definitely help each other. And sometimes, you know, you'll go in the opposite direction from incident responder to threat detector. And that it creates more informed decisions on what you build and how you respond to that first level of event.
think sort of maybe slightly secondary, but a meta point of crisis management and handling a stressful situation is a leadership quality, right? Like, and that's really like you want to become a VP, a chief information security officer, a CIO, like all of these exec level jobs will be about handling like change management, and crisis management. And I know we talked a little bit about, IR can be stressful, but it's also a muscle, right? Like it's also a skill. You do it long enough, it's a job, right? So you're gonna develop that muscle of like, yep, this is another incident. This is, another new situation. This is exciting. So how can we start looking at incidents as opportunities that we can learn from, an opportunity for us to improve? I think is just joke in the team that, if you become a manager or then, like if you're kind of moving through the conventional career ladder, doesn't mean that you're off call. It means that you're always on call. You're always an escalation point, right? So I think it's quite an interesting skill to learn, which I think it will pay dividends for future career growth.
Good question, Tammy. Thank you for that. We have another question. It is, do you have any advice on how to transition into incident response from another area of cybersecurity? Swathi, why don't we start with you, since you've had somewhat diverse security experience?
Yeah, and I think, breaking into the field and making it to that next level, I think is quite the challenge, right? Like, but it's not obviously an insurmountable thing. If you can kind of get exposed to IR related things in your current job, maybe like that's a great way to start, right? For example, like our team does incident commander training. Like if the security team that you're part of, like, or even externally, if there is an incident commander training, that would be an excellent starting point to take that on, right? And often, like when someone's running an incident, one of the best things I hear is, can I scribe for you? And I'm like, yes, I would love to get someone to scribe, because it gets really hard when you're trying to focus on, okay, what are the different ongoing threads, and how can I get people to like focus on the analysis, investigation, discovery, whatever piece we're working on. And also at the same time, like make sure the documentation, timeline, all of that is correct, right? So if there is opportunity to get yourself exposed to that area, please do that. And I think another point that Sneha brought up was like, it's getting to be more engineering centric, right? Like how can I learn, say, SQL or some other query language which could be easily applied to writing detection and things like that. I think that would be quite useful as well.
Just a couple of things to that really quickly. I think sometimes people think that, you need to know it all to even get in. We've talked a little bit about that. And somebody actually posted this recently on LinkedIn and I read, and it's really simple steps you can take, small steps, right? To Swathi's point, whatever your role is today, everybody has incidents in the scope of their role. Their own kinds of incidents. Security is not the only team that may have incidents, right? If you want to be an incident commander someday, whatever project you're leading, really driving that, speaking up, taking charge of situations is one way to practice that. And from a technical side, it's really not about on your first year in the field trying to reverse engineer a malware right away. That's not where you should begin, I would say. Simple things, you can download this install the free version of Splunk, look at your own logs. There is OpenDNS is a tool. That's how I play around sometimes. You can install it. You can look at your own logs. So really small steps. It doesn't have to be the advanced level things that you're doing, which I know can look really good, but again, it takes a lot of experience to get there. So start small. And I think the rest will just follow.
I would love to add to that. There are absolutely tactical skill sets that give you a better opportunity. And those are some of those things that Sneha mentioned already. I think enjoying investigating, like you're solving a puzzle, is, just a personal requirement. If you don't enjoy investigating, you might not enjoy incident response. Computer and network forensics, that's a topic that you can gain exposure to. Coding is a language of your choice, as long as you understand how to code. That's a topic. And having strong communication skills. So those are things that I think are kind of tangible tactical skills that are needed for incident response. But I do want to take a step back and say, do a callback to what I said earlier. You need to put your intention out into the universe, and you need to apply. You need to apply, even if you don't think you're ready. And don't be afraid of rejection. I think those are the really big ones. I think in addition to that, the networking, put that out into the universe. Let people who are in the field know that you're interested. You might get a job referral. And so some of the things that we did, at Facebook is we had this, I forget what it was called, but we, for a month or a quarter, you could sort of do a temporary sit-in and be a member of a team, right? So that was one way about like joining the team and trying it out for a month or two and seeing how it goes for you, and then see whether or not you want to make a formal switch into that team is another option if your company has those kinds of resources and opportunities available to you. But yeah, I think the really big one is like, if you want to do this, you got to put your intention out into the universe. You got to talk to people who are in the industry. You got to let them know you're interested. You got to apply to jobs, even if you don't think you're ready. Go through those. The big one is accepting an interview request, even if you're pretty darn sure you're going to bomb it. And that's okay. And understanding that, like, it's going to reveal to you topics of what they're looking for. It's going to reveal to you knowledge gaps of where you can improve. So not being afraid of rejection, but seeing it more as an informing force to let you know what to do next. But apply. Yeah.
Yes. Just a few. And one more question, so maybe you all want to touch on it just briefly. The question is, what are your views on the relationship of IR with business continuity, teams, and processes? So what is that relationship? Do any of you want to take that?
I can talk about it a little bit. I think business continuity and incident response, they sound very similar. Like if you've got a disaster recovery test, you're working with your business continuity partners to make sure that business continues as expected and we're not impacting our customers. And so a lot of times I think that a really great way for an incident response program to succeed is to have strong relationships with other teams in different departments, and building that sort of strong relationship with a business continuity team, creating a tabletop scenario that directly involves them and sort of exposes business continuity to who to reach out to, what are the protocols and procedures, what to expect. Those sorts of things I think are, it's just another aspect of a company that incident response will interface with. And so it's very important.
To Bridget, a lot of IR in general even is you need to know and hopefully have that relationship built of who to talk to also, right? Especially in a large company when there's so many different teams. So I think we talked about this a little earlier when we talked about reactive versus not always being reactive, is like using that downtime to build the relations. Don't just be going and seeing teams either during an incident or to because they did something that you got an alert or something, right? Don't be that team. Start building those relations early. Tabletops, like Bridget mentioned, are a great way. We actually have done a full day of technical, where it's all technical teams, and a full day of non-technical teams, right? Because they play such a huge role in when it's an incident, whether it's legal, PR, other teams. So I think if there's any one thing you can take away as far as other teams, is building that relationship early. Don't wait for the incident.
The incident responder's job is never done. It's all the time. And to that point, we're coming right up on 4:30 here. Panelists, thank you so much for your wonderful insights and letting us kind of peek into your careers as women in this field. You're Wonder Woman to a lot of us, so thank you for being here and inspiring us. There are just a few comments in the chat. We actually will get a transcript of this, and you can also connect with us. Our profiles, I think, all have our LinkedIns. So if we didn't get to your question, connect with us, or we'll follow up. We'll follow up with you afterwards. But I do want to let everyone get over to all of the remaining wonderful sessions today, and we hope to see all of you on screen next time.
Thank you, Kristen, for excellent moderation.
Yeah, and
thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone that took out the time to attend. And like Kristen said, always happy to connect and chat more. And one takeaway, if you can take from Bridget, is network, apply. So connect with us if you need ideas. We want to learn from you as well. So don't be shy. And thank you so much, Kristen. This was wonderful.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.